Okay, let's unpack this. If you're tuning in, chances are you're uh, keenly interested in tokenized assets. You know, how digital tokens are starting to represent real value, creating these new possibilities for ownership participation. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a space that's poised to, well, potentially revolutionize how we build, own, and interact with the physical world around us. We're talking decentralized physical infrastructure networks, or DePIN.
That's right. And we've pulled together a really interesting stack of sources for this one. We've got a comprehensive research paper breaking down the fundamentals of DePIN. There's also a white paper for a specific energy-focused project called C4E,
Okay.
plus some market reports looking at token economics, these emerging narratives, and an article on broader blockchain trends. Lots to dig into.
So our mission here is to cut through the noise, really understand what DePIN actually is. Then we want to peel back the layers, see how it works, uncover the uh, absolutely critical role tokens play in making it function, and maybe most importantly, connect the dots on why this matters specifically to you, especially if you're exploring the world of tokenized assets and, looking for opportunities there.
Absolutely. But before we properly dive in, we do need to include an important note, disclaimer. I am not a licensed financial advisor. The information provided here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.
Right, essential stuff. Okay, let's jump in then. At its heart, DePIN is this concept that asks, what if we use blockchain tech, which we know for decentralizing, like digital info and finance? What if we used it to decentralize physical infrastructure? Things like energy grids, communication networks, even mapping or compute power.
And the key question is, why now? Why is this idea gaining so much traction now?
Well, think about the traditional infrastructure we rely on, usually run by large, centralized entities.
Yeah, the big players.
Exactly. And that creates vulnerabilities. You've got single points of failure.
Right.
One problem takes down the whole service. There are concerns about data privacy,
Mm.
naturally, when one company controls everything.
Yeah.
And the costs. I mean, the costs to expand or maintain these networks are just enormous, often very slow-moving, which can stifle innovation.
Okay, so that's the old way. Here's where it gets really interesting, right? DePIN proposes a completely different model. By using blockchain distributed networks, you can actually spread the control and management of this infrastructure across lots of participants. So instead of one big company owning and running it all,
Yeah.
you have potentially thousands of individuals or smaller groups contributing resources, hardware, bandwidth, whatever it needs. And this decentralized approach, it offers potential solutions to those problems we just mentioned. Take privacy and security. Instead of one big data silo, data is managed in a more distributed way, cryptographically secured on a blockchain, much harder for anyone to misuse or lose sensitive info. And resilience with multiple independent nodes, the network is inherently tougher. If one part fails, the others can often pick up the slack. No single point of failure.
Plus, and this is big, it kind of blows the doors open for innovation and competition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, traditionally, building a nationwide energy grid or a mobile network takes billions, navigating huge regulatory hurdles.
Immense barriers to entry.
Yeah. But DePIN potentially lowers these barriers significantly. If you can contribute, say, a sensor or a wireless hotspot or some compute power, you can actually participate in building and operating a piece of that network.
Exactly. It fosters competition, could lead to more efficient, maybe even community-driven services. It's not just companies building anymore. Communities are building with these token incentives.
And it's catching on. The term itself, DePIN, it was formally recognized, popularized through a poll by Messari, I read.
That's right. It signals it's becoming a recognized category within the whole blockchain space. It's not just a fringe idea now.
Okay, so how do you actually, build these things, the architecture? That research paper mentioned layers.
Yeah, they proposed a 5-layer architecture, kind of like conceptual layers working together. Application, governance, data, blockchain, and infrastructure. For understanding the basics, the really foundational pieces are the blockchain and infrastructure layers. The blockchain layer, that's the digital backbone, the decentralized operating system, if you will. It includes the blockchains themselves, maybe a general layer 1 or layer 2, or even a specific chain built just for that DePIN project.
Like an application-specific chain?
Precisely. And all the tools needed to interact wallets, bridges to other chains, node services. This layer is crucial. It provides that trustless environment for the economics, how tokens are earned and spent, and for governance, how the network makes decisions. The paper mentions projects like IoTex providing specialized solutions here, particularly for the IoT side of DePIN.
Okay, blockchain layer is the digital trust layer.
Okay.
And the infrastructure layer, that's the physical part, right? The P in DePIN.
Exactly. That's the cornerstone. The sensors, the hard drives, the GPUs, the wireless transmitters, the actual stuff. It needs to be super scalable because it's dealing with physical resources and data flow in the real world. It includes what they call overlay networks, the peer-to-peer connections enabled by the blockchain and underlay networks, the core physical components like radio towers or fiber, or even just the physical spot where a sensor sits.
Right.
And critically, it includes the terminal devices. These are the bits of hardware people actually deploy. The sensors collecting air quality data, the Wi-Fi routers providing coverage, the servers offering storage. These devices, deployed by the community, are the engine. They drive all the different applications we see in DePIN.
Okay, got it. Decentralized digital backbone, physical infrastructure layer connecting to the real world. But what actually makes people want to set up these sensors or host servers or share their internet connection? This is where the tokens are absolutely central, isn't it?
Absolutely. You nailed it. Tokens aren't just a feature. They are the central nervous system of a DePIN. They're the core incentive mechanism. They align everyone's interests, the network builders, the users, the contributors. They motivate people, individuals, companies to contribute their valuable physical resources, their hardware, their location, their bandwidth to the network.
So the basic loop is contribute resources, earn tokens in return.
That's the fundamental exchange, yes. Contributors get rewarded with the network's native token for providing those resources or services. Think about concrete examples, makes it clearer. Helium hotspot owners, they earn HNT or mobile tokens for providing LoRaWAN or 5G coverage.
Right, I've heard of helium.
Or Hive Mapper people put dash cams in their cars, drive around mapping, and earn honey tokens for that data, which also helps train AI.
Huh, interesting.
Render network people share their computer's GPU power, earn RNDR tokens for helping others with complex rendering jobs. It's a direct trade, real-world contribution for tokenized value.
This sounds an awful lot like real-world asset tokenization, RWA. That's a huge narrative in crypto right now. Is DePIN just a type of RWA?
It's definitely deeply intertwined, yeah. RWA tokenization is the broader tech that converts value tied to physical assets, could be real estate, could be commodities, could be, as one source mentions for DePIN, energy assets or EV charging stations.
Okay.
Converts that value into digital tokens on a blockchain. DePIN uses this concept. It tokenizes either the asset itself or maybe more often, the right to earn revenue from or participate in that physical infrastructure network.
And for you, listening, someone interested in tokenized assets, why is this RWA connection within DePIN so significant? What's the takeaway?
Well, it takes things that were previously really illiquid or just inaccessible. I mean, how do you invest in a tiny piece of an energy grid or a community-built wireless network easily?
You generally can't.
Right. But RWA tokenization makes them potentially liquid, tradable digital assets. It allows for fractional ownership. So you could own a small piece of a large infrastructure project represented by a token. It just opens up possibilities for diversifying investments into tangible real-world resources, but using digital tokens. That wasn't easy before.
And the market sees this potential. Those reports we looked at mentioned some big numbers, right?
Right, yeah. The current RWA market is estimated around, what, $116 billion? But the projections are staggering, potentially $10 trillion by 2030.
10 trillion.
That's the projection. And a huge chunk of that growth is expected to come from blockchain adoption in traditional finance, yes, but also specifically from tokenizing real-world assets, including the kind that power these DePIN networks.
Wow. Okay, so huge potential market growth. Let's talk types. How are DePINs categorized? What kinds of networks are we actually seeing?
The sources generally break them down into two main buckets based on the resource being decentralized.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, you have physical resource networks. These involve deploying actual physical hardware, like sensors or wireless devices, to build out networks in the real world.
Makes sense.
Within that category, you've got sensor networks. These use devices to collect all sorts of data. Examples: energy networks monitoring consumption or distribution. The sources mentioned are Green Daylight Energy, SmartPoint, Star Power, environmental monitoring like WeatherXM or PlanetWatch, mobility networks for tracking, navigation, logistics, think projects like Drive, Dymo, Natix, location services like GeoDNet, Onakoi, and mapping like Hive Mapper, which we mentioned.
Lots of sensors collecting data. And the other type of physical network?
Wireless networks. Here, the goal is using hardware devices, could be for 5G, Wi-Fi, LoRaWAN, Bluetooth, to create decentralized communication coverage. Helium Mobile is a big example. Carrier One, Wi-Fi Map Nodal, Basically turning lots of individual devices into nodes that form a collective network.
Okay, so physical sensors and wireless. What's the second main category?
The second big bucket is digital resource networks. These incentivize people to share digital resources. They already have things like internet bandwidth, computer storage space, or computing power.
Ah, okay. So less about deploying new hardware, more about sharing existing digital capacity.
Generally, yes. For bandwidth, think decentralized VPNs like Mysterium or content delivery networks, web proxies like Presearch or the Brave browsers model.
Got it. And storage.
Decentralized storage networks offer alternatives to centralized cloud storage. People contribute hard drive space or server capacity. Filecoin and Arweave are probably the best known examples here. BNB Greenfield too.
Right, seeing those names. And
And
compute.
compute networks leverage decentralized hardware for processing power. This can be general-purpose computing, like Render or Akash, or more specialized tasks, like video transcoding with LivePeer, data indexing with the graph, and very relevant now, providing GPUs for AI training and inference. Projects like GPU.net, Fetch AI, Render again tapping into that huge demand for AI compute.
So a really wide range of applications, both physical and digital. The sources mentioned quite a few projects: Helium, HiveMapper, Render, Mysterium, Arweave, Filecoin, and C4E, which you said was the energy one from the white paper.
That's right, C4E, focusing on the energy sector. And it serves as a great case study to make the token economics more concrete.
Perfect. Let's use C4E then. How do the tokens actually work inside that specific network? If I hold C4E tokens, what can I actually do with them? What's the utility?
Okay, so the C4E white paper lays out several core functions for its token, which are pretty typical utility models you see in DePINs. First, transaction fees. Pretty standard. Any operation on the C4E network, moving value, interacting with services, it requires paying a small fee in C4E tokens.
Okay, pays for network usage.
Exactly. Second, staking. This is vital for proof-of-stake networks like C4E aims to be. If you hold C4E tokens, you can stake them, essentially locking them up temporarily, to help secure the network by validating transactions. And for doing that, you earn rewards more C4E tokens.
So passive income potential for token holders who help secure things.
Precisely. You're putting your tokens to work for the network and earning yield. And third, very important, governance. Holding and staking C4E tokens gives you voting rights in the C4E Governance DAO, the Decentralized Autonomous Organization.
Right.
Meaning token holders get a direct say in the big decisions, how the network develops, changes to policies, how funds are used. It's a key part of that decentralized ownership idea. You actually have influence.
Okay, so fees, staking for rewards, and governance rights. Pretty clear utility. The white paper also mentioned how fees and new tokens are distributed. It wasn't just simple payments.
Right. They detail a specific flow. Transaction fees collected, plus new tokens created through the planned inflation, they don't just vanish or go to one central company. They're channeled through what they call distributors. And these funds get allocated to different parts of the ecosystem. A chunk goes to rewarding the stakers, as we said. Another chunk provides usage incentives rewarding specific positive actions, like green energy producers feeding into the network, or consumers using it, or people providing liquidity for the token.
So rewarding participation beyond just staking.
Exactly. And there's also funding allocated to a development fund for ongoing work on the project. They also mention a mechanism where a portion of fees can be burned permanently removed from supply, though they note it's set to 0% initially, but the DAO, the governance body, can vote to change that later.
Interesting. So the community can decide to make the token deflationary over time.
Potentially, yes. The whole system is designed to create this internal economy that rewards all the different types of participants and funds continued growth.
And what about the overall token supply, inflation? How does that work in C4E?
They detail the tokenomics. A total potential supply capped at 300 million C4E tokens. It starts with an initial annual inflation rate of 12%.
12%. That seems quite high.
It is relatively high initially, yes. That equals about 40 million new tokens per year at the start. But the white paper states this inflation rate is designed to halve every 4 years.
Ah, like Bitcoin's having.
Exactly the same model. So the idea is to heavily incentivize early participation, get people building and joining the network quickly, while the gradual reduction in inflation over time manages the long-term supply and potentially increases scarcity if demand grows.
Okay, that structure makes sense. Front load the rewards, then taper off. It sounds like all these mechanics, the incentives, the fee structure, the staking are designed to feed into something they call the DePIN flywheel.
Precisely. That's the core concept they're aiming for. The flywheel idea suggests that the token incentives encourage more people to deploy hardware or contribute resources.
Step one, grow the network.
Right. More hardware, more resources means better network coverage and capacity. Increased capacity leads to more people actually using the network. As utilization grows and coverage expands, the cost per unit of service, like per kilowatt hour of energy managed, or per connection potentially decreases due to efficiency gains.
Lower costs attract more users.
Exactly. Which leads to more activity, more fees generated, more value flowing through the system, which allows for more rewards, attracting even more contributors, and the flywheel spins faster.
Driving growth and value within the ecosystem. A positive feedback loop.
That's the goal. Growth reinforcing growth, all powered by the token incentives.
Okay, so let's bring this right back to you, the listener interested in tokenized assets. What does all this mean practically? These token mechanics we just discussed, earning tokens for contributing resources, staking them for security and getting rewards, participating in governance votes, these are the direct ways you can interact with and potentially benefit from DePINs. It goes beyond just, buying a token and hoping the price goes up.
Absolutely. It offers a pathway to gain exposure not just to digital assets, but to the value generated by real-world infrastructure and essential services, energy, connectivity, storage, compute power, but accessed and owned in this new tokenized way via the blockchain.
So investing in DePIN tokens or even participating directly by, say, running a sensor or providing storage, if that's your thing, it can represent a real stake in these decentralized physical networks.
Right. It opens up opportunities potentially for earning yield through staking or service provision, influencing how the project develops through governance, and benefiting if that flywheel concept plays out and the network grows.
And connecting back to the RWA trend and those massive market projections we talked about earlier.
Yes, given those projections, the potential growth in this specific area of tokenized assets, these networks, bridging digital tokens and physical infrastructure, looks pretty significant over the next few years.
It really paints a compelling picture, a decentralized future for the stuff we rely on every day. But it can't all be smooth sailing. What are the roadblocks, the challenges?
No, definitely not smooth sailing yet. The sources are clear about the hurdles. One major one is scalability.
Can these decentralized networks actually handle the massive scale needed to compete with traditional centralized providers?
That's the big question. How do you scale to match the capacity of a national energy grid or a global telecom network using a decentralized model? It's a huge technical challenge.
What else?
Interoperability is another one. Getting different DePIN networks to work together seamlessly, or even different layers within the same DePIN to communicate efficiently. Still lots of work needed there.
And I imagine regulations must be a minefield.
Oh, absolutely. Physical infrastructure is already heavily regulated in most places. Trying to apply new decentralized ownership models, token-based incentives, community governance, it bumps up against existing legal frameworks in complex ways.
Yeah, navigating that regulatory landscape is going to be critical. Need clearer rules.
Definitely. These are significant challenges that need solutions for DePIN to really reach their full potential.
Okay, so wrapping up this deep dive then. DePIN is fundamentally about using blockchain and tokenization to build and operate physical infrastructure networks differently. Shifting from that old centralized control model towards community ownership, aiming for networks that are more resilient, potentially more efficient, and foster more innovation.
It's a really powerful mix, isn't it? Digital incentives creating tangible, real-world utility and infrastructure.
It really is. And this leaves us and you with a pretty important question to think about as you explore this space further. If tokenized assets can increasingly represent ownership and participation in the fundamental physical infrastructure all around us, our energy, our data, our communications, how might that change not just what you can invest in, but maybe even how you relate to and interact with the physical world itself?
Yeah, definitely something to ponder. And one final time, just a reminder, disclaimer, I am not a licensed financial advisor. The information provided here is for general informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. Please consult a qualified professional before making any financial decisions.